Steve, I think they got it all wrong. When the Tropicana field broke down, when the roof flew off, and they were looking for a place to play, they should have said, screw it. We're playing 162 on the road, baby.
Well, how about just playing 162 in Yankee Stadium? I mean, they're trying to do it in Yankee Stadium South. That one didn't work, but the North one.
Just doing the real ballpark up there, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to share it. You know, the Yankees want to help us out.
I mean, outside of Max Fried pitching, the Rays own New York, right?
They really do. They really do. And not for nothing, but Taylor Wall's got 4 knocks on Sunday, and that's the 3rd time in his career he's done it. So
I thought that was like an average month for him. I mean,
it just about is. It's incredible. Dogs and cats living together. They win 7-5 and win the series.
I did like his comment, though. I did like his. Did you read his comments? And I'll paraphrase
No, I didn't
them.
see his quote.
His paraphrase was something like, "Yeah, today I woke up and decided to hit. You know, most days I wake up and don't, but hopefully on Tuesday I'll wake up again and decide to hit."
Decide? This is conscious?
Something like that. I mean, it was,
yeah.
I read them. I didn't hear them, so I'm assuming in context it was kind of tongue in cheek. At least that's the way I read it. But
he said, I felt like my swing was a little bit shoulder. I guess some days I wake up and decide to hit. Some days, most days, I wake up and decide not to hit.
Yeah, that was.
Hopefully, I wake up in 2 days and decide to hit again.
You know what? If he did say that tongue in cheek like that, I have a lot of respect for that. Actually,
it's hilarious either way. It really is. He has a good sense of humor and a good sense of his own worth. Still one hell of a defensive player for sure. Jonathan Aranda, though, by the way, what a year that guy's having. 3 for 4, a home run, 2 walks, and 3 RBIs.
Top 5 in baseball and OPS now.
Yes, he is at 975. Yeah. So he did great. And the pitching, look, their pitching has, kept them in most games. Usually they don't hit when they lose. Taj Bradley doesn't always make it easy on himself, but he got out of the first inning without a run, so that was new.
What I see, since April 23rd, the Rays are the best team in the AL East.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
So for the last couple weeks,
right?
They're 3 games behind New York now, tied for second or third in the division. I think tied for third. But
yeah, I mean they're hanging in there. Look, and I was thinking about this. Like it's undeniable the disparity in baseball. With the salaries and all of that, and there's really no parity in it. I mean, you look at the Dodgers and the Yankees and, these big market teams and the payrolls and all of that. And I was just thinking like, here comes Judge and here comes Paul Goldschmidt and, who's the right fielder he was playing from, used to play for the Cubs and the Dodgers. Bellinger. And so, I mean, they got all these guys, right? And they just run them out there. Last year it was Soto. And there's Kevin Cash, his lineup card, does not even remotely resemble what's on the other side, what's coming out of the dugout over there. I mean, freaking Judge is one of the best players ever, and certainly one of the best in our era. I'd say right now, it's him and Ohtani, and the guy's hitting nearly freaking 400.
I might actually give it to Judge at this point.
I would too.
With Ohtani not pitching right now,
I would too.
Just hitting, like Judge right now, is the best hitter on the planet.
He is. He really is. And it's not, it's not even funny, like just how good he is. And he's in his 30s. It's not like this is a young guy necessarily anymore. But man, you talk about a tough out to put in the middle of your lineup, and for the Rays to have to go up against that in the Bronx, 42,000 people booing them against them, shouting all kinds of things at him. I mean, it really is something when Kevin Cash sits down and says, all right, so I got Taylor Walls and I've got, a couple guys from AAA and I got Chandler Simpson. By the way, Chandler Simpson has been the difference. Whatever they've done offensively since he's arrived, he's been in the middle of it every day. If it's positive. We were talking about this before we came on. This play when there's a chopper up the middle and the short, I think it was a shortstop dove. It was still kind of in the infield. He gets up. Now Simpson has run from second to third and literally pulls up because the ball doesn't really go into the outfield. So he does the right thing. He kind of pulls up and nearly stops. And then he realizes the guy's on the ground. So he then just reaccelerates and scores easily. The guy can't even get the throw from behind second to home in time to get him, and it's not even close. But they showed the replay of that, and he's rounded the bag, and he's almost all but stopped. The reacceleration that this guy did, he took 2 steps and was at full speed. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, you talk about a weapon now. He really is.
Well, and as long as he can get on base. I mean, we've seen a couple other guys like this in baseball.
Yeah.
Billy Hamilton, most recently.
Yep.
All the speed in the world, good defensively, but just couldn't get on base enough. Like, you got that speed. If you can't get on base, it doesn't matter.
That's true.
And Chandler Simpson's been able to get on base, and he's been doing very well. And just his first couple weeks here in the big leagues at this point. So if he can keep that up, I mean, it's a tremendous weapon.
What Kevin Cash said that he's impressed with is just Simpson's ability, the bat to ball. Like, he makes good contact a lot, and of course he doesn't hit the ball in the air too much. He's had some slicers down the left field line. But for the most part, he stays through the middle of the field and gets a lot of balls on the ground, which is exactly what you want from him. We want infielders to have to hurry up, and if he can't get it through the infield, make tough plays. But the major league pitching, I mean, you go from AAA to big leagues, you're just seeing wicked stuff all the time. One guy out of the bullpen after the other. And Simpson has actually handled that very well. Like, he's not had bad at bats. He's made contact most of the time. And then, of course, if he gets on, he's almost an automatic stolen base. So I think he's really, sort of energized them at the top of the order. Look, they didn't hit I think against left-handers, they're just abysmal. They're next to last, I think, in the majors, and their right-handed lineup is certainly limited compared to the others. But you know what? Brandon Lau, who's had some tough luck and then got into a little bit of a slump, looks like he's maybe coming out of it a little bit. So as long as they can just scrap along, and that's really what these guys are. And John Romano wrote about in the Tampa Bay Times. They're just kind of a scrappy bunch. Like, they can look awful and get no hit into the 8th inning, depending on who your scorer is. And that can be fairly routine, where they score 3 runs in 4 games during a stretch between Kansas City and the first game against the Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like, Fried just owns them, and he's undefeated. He's kind of, been really why the Yankees are, above 500, because he's like 8-0. But everybody else, they have a chance against, and their pitching has been pretty darn good for the most part. So, and they're also, they're running the bases well. Like, they're getting stolen bases, but they're not running recklessly. Like, last year, it seemed like they made a lot more outs on the bags. They've had a couple games like that, but for the most part, they're running smart, and they put a lot of pressure on the defense. You saw that again on Sunday. So, hey, man, if they could just learn to win at Steinbrenner, and I know Mark Tompkin talked to, I think it was Brandon Lau, about playing there, and it's been a little frustrating for him, to be honest with you, and mostly because they've not gotten rewarded. I think people generally believed, maybe early in the season, that would be a hitter's park, because it's the same dimensions as Yankee Stadium, kind of a short right field, but the wind and everything is kind of, knocked some balls down, and it hasn't really played the way they thought it would. So they're still adjusting to that. But man, these last couple road trips, you went 5-1 on the West Coast and swept the Padres, and then a little mini trip up to New York and win 2 out of 3. I mean, that will work if you could just
7
start
out of
winning
9.
at home.
7 out of 9. They've won 7 of the last 8 on the road, because they lost that first game in Arizona. So
that's right. So good for them, man. I mean, like I said, it's hard to compete, with in Major League Baseball with their limitations, and they've had injuries upon injuries. You've got a whole outfield that probably did start somewhere else and not in Tampa Bay.
All 3 of them were in the minors to start the season.
That's exactly right.
Nothing's like, I mean, where's Josh Lowe, Palacios, DeLuca? That was supposed to be your starting outfield.
That's right.
And instead, you've got, Mangum's hurt now, but Simpson and
Meisner.
Meisner, and you traded for Jankowski, and I mean it's completely different.
Jankowski ended up with 3 hits on Sunday, so he's helped them. Yeah, good for them. I mean, I don't know what the problem is at Steinbrenner, and I know it's going to get hella hot. And their first rain delay actually, came at Yankee Stadium of all places, and not here.
By the way, did you see what the Rays are giving away during their first rain delay at Steinbrenner Field, the first ever in franchise history?
I did not.
I saw it in the Tampa Bay Times. They're going to give away ponchos.
Nice.
During the first rain delay ever at the history of Steinbrenner.
Now, that's a great, great marketing idea, whoever came up with that.
Yes, it is.
Really smart.
Yes.
So they just have them available, and they're going to break them out as soon as they get their first rain delay?
They're ready, but whenever the first rain delay in franchise history at home comes.
That's genius, actually.
It really is. It's really well done.
They do a nice job with that. They do a nice job in marketing. The concession I always wanted, though, and this is true, is like I want the poncho concession at Disney World or even Busch Gardens. Like I'll take that one too, because for whatever reason, people go over there and they're not. You just don't think about it, right? Like in the summertime. I mean, some people probably do, but if you've ever had to go, been caught at Disney or someplace, and it's like, damn, I don't have anything, and you go into the stores and the ponchos are flying off the shelves and they're like $30 each.
Yep.
And it's like, oh man. And you probably have 2 others just like it at home.
Oh, more than 2. You have a whole box full of them in your garage.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. I bought these before and I didn't even bother to bring them, and now I'm buying them again. Oh man. Disney prices. So yeah, well, good for the Rays. I mean, they got a long way to go, and they're still under 500. But that Kansas City series, and the Royals are good. I mean, the Royals are pitching as well as anybody in baseball right now. So they came in hot and they left hot. You can't bang them too bad for that. You just got to learn how to play at home. Whatever that thing is, it's bothering them a little bit. If they could, turn Steinbrenner into some kind of home field advantage, then that would certainly help them, because they've been pretty good on the road, especially these last 2 road trips. We got the rookie mini camps coming up this week. What else we got going on?
Well, the Lightning had their exit interviews Friday.
Oh, yes. We haven't talked since then. I want to get into that. It's very interesting. And I thought the players had, especially, I thought Andrei Vasilevskiy, and then you said that
Brandon Hagel talking about the hit from Ekblad.
Yeah.
Very insightful, very honest. Still a lot of emotion in that, and understandably so.
Yeah, so we'll get into the Lightning and their exit interviews and what John Cooper had to say about his future. But first, hey, make sure you guys get on down to International Plaza Mall. I'm sure you've been there before, but we want you to go to Breitling Boutique. You talk about the Breitling company's been making these switch watches now for over 140 years, and Breitling Boutique is sort of in the center of the mall upstairs. Tremendous store, unbelievable customer service, and you talk about a great collection of watches. For the men, the Navatimers, the Chronomats. They also have watches for your wife, for your girlfriend. These are beautiful sports watches that are incredibly durable, all kinds of different colored wristbands for her. And then they've also been, doing this thing with the NFL's 104th year anniversary. There's 32 teams in the National Football League. Each one, Breitling has made a watch for, a team watch, limited supply of those while supplies last, but all 32 teams represented with the color on the face of these beautiful chronomats, the team colors, and the logo. I think if you go to tampabay.com, you're likely to see one of their ads that has the Buccaneer watch. Again, while supplies last, but man, these things are collector's items, and that's for sure. So make sure you get on down to Breitling Boutique, and when you do, let them know that you heard about all of this on Sports Day Tampa Bay. All right, so let's talk about this exit interview, because there's a couple things that were said and some that were unsaid. You mentioned Hagel. Look, I thought that that was obviously an egregious hit that should have been called, and that's maybe the worst thing that happened was they missed it, and then the guy ends up scoring the game tying goal. when they had 2 goals in 11 seconds and lost. I thought that was a pivotal game. They could have been 2-2 in that series. But aside from that, he was I get it because I think the NFL has done a good job of trying to take the head out of the game, Steve. I'm not so sure that the NHL has. I think maybe you have to have a little more discipline for these guys that go after guys' heads like that.
Look, hockey's a physical sport. I think there's enough hitting that doesn't get called that should, but it's a physical sport. Guys are going to get hit. The guys are going to get hurt. Occasionally, it's going to be the head. But there's a difference of, in the course of a play, something happening, and the guy looking up and seeing it's a guy that we didn't like something he did a couple games ago, so I'm going to lift my elbow and go after him. Now, whether he actually meant to hit him in the head or the chin or was trying to get maybe high in the chest, I can't tell you. But that was a dirty play. That wasn't in the course of play. Let me go do this. That was, he's just left the puck. I got a chance. Let me raise my arm and go after him. That's dirty. And I don't understand why players in hockey culture are okay with that. He got suspended for 2 games, but it keeps happening, that kind of stuff. This wasn't like a check that, you're finishing a check and your arm just got a little too high. That wasn't this case. Because you look at what he did and how he did it. He saw it was Hagel and basically went, okay, I'm going to go get him. And Hagel talked about, too. He said, look, I'm an honest player. If anybody, and the Panthers said, they tried to talk to him and nothing happened. He goes, nobody said a word to me on the ice. He goes, if somebody said, let's go, I'd have gone, even if I got my butt kicked. He goes, I'm an honest player. I'll answer the bell if someone wants to go. No one did. Instead, they did the cheap shot on him. Took him out of the game. So he missed that game, missed the next game with a concussion. Who knows how long he had been out if they kept playing. I know it's physical. I know guys like to see hitting and fighting and that, but there's a difference between hitting and cheap shotting. And, I don't think cheap shots are punished enough. And if the Lightning player did the same thing, I would say the same thing. There's no cheap shots you're dealing with careers, man. And Brandon said, because look, I could play with a bad leg, a bad arm, a bad whatever. I ain't got one head.
Mm.
How many hits can your brain take? Seriously. And we don't know. And as players get bigger and stronger and the equipment is more, you're seeing more of this stuff. And good on the leagues that are trying to reduce it. And I think the NHL would like to reduce that kind of stuff. But the culture, to me, doesn't go far enough to try to prevent stuff. Because, look, if I'm watching a series, I want Brandon Hagel playing. I don't want him out injured. And if it was a Florida player, I'd say the same thing. I don't want them out in. I want best on best, man. That's what sports is about, right? And the NFL's figured that out. They want Tom Brady. They want Patrick Mahomes. You can't barely touch them. Brady doesn't play anymore, but they know those are the stars. Those are what people are coming to see, buying tickets for or watching on TV. Don't you want best on best? That's what the Four Nations was so great about.
Yeah.
In hockey. It was best on best, and it was guys flying around the ice. There was no cheap shot. It was physical, but there's nothing dirty about it.
No, but that is kind of an exhibition. It's kind of an all-star game, maybe.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the physicality is going to be in those type of situations, or even the Olympics for that matter. Maybe more so there. Look, here's the problem. And football was like this for years. And I think you mentioned Brady, who thinks the pendulum has swung way too far on the offensive side, which is ironic since he's literally one of the players that they changed the rules for after he tore his ACL, that you can't hit a quarterback below the waist hardly. But look, they during all that Hagel stuff, they would go back to ESPN, I believe it was ESPN, and Mark Messier's, on the dais, and they start showing old film of Messier when he was playing, just taking guys' heads one after the other, just knocking guys across the head. and they sat there and they kind of laughed about it, like, "Oh, sorry, we got the wrong tape. That's Messier." And he played a long time ago, but not that long time ago. You know, it's just hockey had its goon era, where there would, be guys on the team who really weren't great skaters or necessarily scorers or defenders, but they were there to enforce. I think they've gotten away from that now, but there's still a culture of hockey that's like, oh, these new guys are soft, and when in my day, and all this kind of thing. And I really don't think that everybody wants to cut that out. I think there's a part of the DNA in hockey that still has this, you know, Broad Street bullies type mentality.
No question about it. And I
They
don't like it.
embrace it. They almost celebrate it in ways.
Mm-hmm. And I for one, and I like I said, I want to see the best players play. I want
I
to see
agree
them
with
play at
you.
their best.
Yeah, so protect your stars. Like it's dumb to go through the playoffs without your best players on the ice.
Yep.
How's that helping your ratings?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he was emotional, and then I thought a couple other things. One, Vasilevskiy was really candid. Um, Not really happy about the way they played. He mentioned game one. He was like, "Give up 6 goals. What the bleep was that?" Like, um, he did credit obviously Florida and where they're at and the run that they're on right now, and nobody was, you know, they all said that's a really great hockey team over there, and they earned it. They outplayed us, and they weren't making excuses. Um, and then the final one was like, and Eduardo Encina wrote a good story about Kucherov, and just his take on what's been an incredible scoring drought for him in terms of goals. Was it 15 playoff games in a row now he's failed to score? Um, but it's not it's not for a lack of effort or want to or any of that. And in fact, he spends so much time on the ice trying to get better. He said that last year, I guess he worked a lot with Hagel, but he's like, hey, if anyone wants to join me, I'll be on the ice like next week, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't take any time off. He's just gonna, and for all the things that are said about Kucherov, good and bad, but some of them bad. And I think he's an MVP candidate again, but you know not the most glib guy in the world, necessarily cooperative with, talkative with media and that sort of thing. And he's Russian, and that probably factors into it a little bit too. But the one thing you can't say about him is that it doesn't matter to him, or he doesn't work at it. Like, he clearly wants to win and has won, and is a Hall of Fame player, and still, right now one of the top players in the game and could win the MVP, I suppose. But like it matters to him, like it bothers him. And for anybody that thinks it doesn't, then just consider what he's going to do a week after the week after their team's eliminated. Like he's not resting on any laurels. He's going to go back on the ice and try to get better and work on that part of his game. That's not where he wants it to be. And I think that's all you can really ask of an athlete. You know what I mean? Like you hurt that you're a fan and you haven't seen them win. You haven't seen them win at home in so long in the playoffs. Like, but these guys aren't satisfied, and they're not, you know, they're not giving up. They're not just saying, "Well, we had our run, we're done." And Kucherov in particular, like he owned it. I thought he owned it, and that was
Mm-hmm.
good.
Julian Breezeball's comments about him was telling too. He said, "Look, Kucherov's a genius." He goes, and like many geniuses, he's misunderstood.
Yeah,
And
I think
people,
he is.
People, because he gave up in the All-Star game on a skills competition where he messed up the first, pass or two.
Right.
And so at that point, he's like, well, I can't win, and gave it up. Now, whether you think that was right or wrong, okay, whatever. But, that's what you see of him. He doesn't speak much to the media. You don't see everything else. And Julian said, he's misunderstood.
Yeah.
And what he does on the ice is fantastic. Now, in the playoffs, it's been a struggle because the other teams know he's the best player on the Lightning. And so they attack him, and Florida's gotten really good at that. And it's stifled him the last 2 years.
Right.
And it's something the Lightning are going to have to figure out. As John Cooper, said during the series and after, Florida's a lot like we were. They're now on top, and we've got to figure out how to, get back on top over them.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but.
Well, I think the easy answer is someone's got to help them out, right? You need other guys to emerge. If they're going to pay that much attention to Kucherov and not give him any time or space, then somebody has to make them pay for that. I don't know how you do it.
The biggest thing, because even Florida's top line didn't do much outside the power play.
That's true. They canceled each other out. It was the third lines that.
Yeah, the Lightning. The Lightning have to figure out how to get more production on the power play in the playoffs.
That's true.
That's where, in 5-on-5 play, Cooch was okay. That line, but you're playing their best defense too. That's part of it, right? But when you're on the power play, they've got to figure out whether it's chalking up some new things or doing something differently, figuring out how to run a power play to where they can get some space and get some scoring. Whether it means the power play goes through Hedman or somebody else instead of Cooch to start, I don't know. I'm not the expert on that. I'll let Jeff Halpern and the coaching staff figure that out. But they've got to figure out something. Florida basically sends two guys to Cooch every time he's got the puck. He's got zero space, so you've got to do something different. So we'll see, what they come up with coming into next season and next year. And, but Julian Breezeball talked about too in this, you can't overreact to a first, very disappointed that they're out in the first round again. Because everything about this team says they should have been further. If you look at the numbers, the last couple of years defensively, they weren't very good. But to finish first in the league in scoring per game, it was third or fourth in goals against per game, fifth on the power play, sixth on the penalty kill. Those are incredible numbers all season.
Yeah.
Vazzy had a phenomenal season.
Yeah.
You can't just overreact because they went out in 5 games to Florida, who's the defending Stanley Cup champion. And for all the intents and purposes, it looked like they could win it again. You still got 3 more rounds to go. We'll see what happens. But I wouldn't bet against them right now.
I wouldn't either.
The way they're playing and the way they know how to win. It's a shame that the way hockey does the playoffs, it's a shame that Dallas and Colorado faced in the first round. That was a tremendous series. It's a shame the Lightning had to face Florida in the first round. But that's the way they set up the playoffs, so that's what you got to figure out how to go through and win.
I'm not sure the NHL is doing themselves a favor, but it is cyclical. But I think you could maybe have better matchups later in the playoffs if you didn't do it this way.
Agreed.
But like I said, it right now Florida's on top, and that's made life difficult for the Lightning. And when the Lightning were on top, it made life difficult for Florida.
Yep.
So the worm has turned, so to speak. But and then finally, John Cooper, Hall of Fame coach, longest tenured coach in the NHL, said the following, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but it was something to the effect, he was asked about, his future, and something to the effect of, I can't imagine coaching someplace else. Everything he said would lead the normal casual fan to believe that, well, he's back. And look, he may well be. And I think he's under contract for one more year, isn't he?
It sounds like it. Julian wouldn't confirm that, or they don't discuss that. Coaches aren't like players where it's.
But that's the feeling I got, was that there might be a year left on his deal. Regardless,
the reports were it was up after this year, but before this season, he signed a 1-year extension. So that's what it sounds like.
So whatever the contract is, the contract is. But if you really go back and look at what was said, or rather what was not said, and Cooper parsed his words very carefully. Didn't come off that way. The sentiment was, I'm happy here, and I know he's building a home and all that kind of nonsense, but there's nothing that is definitive. It wasn't like, oh no, quote me, I'm back next season no matter what. You know, it was, I can't imagine coaching somewhere. That's, today maybe you can't, but tomorrow if somebody threw a pile of money at you and a golden opportunity to build a new program, maybe you would imagine it. Just stating facts that my kids have, this is the only place they've known and that sort of stuff. Okay, but that doesn't say they wouldn't move. Like I just thought it was interesting if you really parse his words. And he's a former attorney. He's an
Well, I was going to
attorney.
say, if you listen to him for the last 12 years running the Lightning,
Yeah,
he rarely says anything definitive
right.
in,
That's
in
true. He
any
always leaves
situation.
himself an out. Yeah,
In any situation,
that's
whether it's
true.
about him or team or whatever. Like
Players, yeah, that's true.
he very rarely says anything that's 100% declarative certain.
Almost a master at that,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. I mean, he's a lawyer. He always
Mhm.
leaves outs on anything he says, whether it's about him personally or anything else. Like that's him.
Right. Well, the speculation is out there, and I think every team in the NHL that is contemplating a coaching change, their fan base is the first name that they're mentioning in stories is Cooper's, and rightfully so. Right, rightfully so. If you could lure a John Cooper away from the Lightning, then how much better is your program? But there's obvious connections with the owner in Utah, with was it Lewicki in Seattle. And then really any name the city. And he is from Canada, and he's a
Well, he's
Team
from
Canada
Canada. He's on
coach.
Team Canada. Like he's got connections everywhere.
Yeah, I mean he's been in the league so long now, and he's a Hall of Fame coach. Not many guys walking around with 2 Stanley Cups. Not many.
Yeah. But
Not
like
many coaches.
if you're John Cooper, if you want to go somewhere else, all you've got to do is pick up the phone and go, "Hey, I'd like to coach your team." And every team's either going done or seriously considering it. Like,
Yeah, and for that matter, and I don't know this, but for that matter, if he called Julian Breezeball or whoever's running the Lightning in an ownership standpoint, whether it's not Bennick but whoever, I think at this point, because of what Cooper has done, because of the gratitude that this organization would they ever want to lose John Cooper? No, you'd like to lock him up for life if you could, but by the same token, there's some gratitude involved too, and if he genuinely, wanted a challenge someplace else and thought this was the time to depart, then I don't see anybody standing in his way. I guess we'll know soon enough, as these teams start exploring what their chances are with various coachings and situations and whatnot. But it was notable. We both noticed it. It was noticeable that there was nothing in there that was declarative. Nothing that said, "I will be back. Looking forward to coaching here and only here." In 25, 26. Like you didn't hear that.
no, but that's not Cooper style.
It is
Period.
not. No, it's not. And why would it be, right? Like, why would you box yourself like that? Because you truly don't know what opportunity might arise, right? In life,
Correct.
anything.
But like, I mean, Cooper's done this his whole life as a lawyer and as a coach too. He's never been declarative.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to close the door. My gut feeling is that this team believes it was closer than that 4-1 series indicated, you know? And really the series turned on 2 goals in 11 seconds in game 4. But because of that, I believe that they believe that they can make some changes and be right back on top, probably earning home ice somewhere a year from now and be in a better position to beat Florida. Like they'll obviously look at what the Panthers have done, how to combat that, and will make some moves in the offseason. They got some decisions, obviously, with several players, but I think they still believe that, even with some guys in their 30s, including Kucherov, that they still have a really productive core here. And some of the moves they made last year did make them better. And if they can tweak a few things and add a few pieces, I think the Lightning believe that window is still now. How long it will stay open, who knows? but I still think they believe or should believe that they can make another run with this group, with this group of guys.
Yeah, I don't anticipate major changes. But, I think if he can figure out ways to change or heavy up the bottom three or the bottom D pair or the bottom six forwards, I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to look next year for Gage Gonsalves to keep making big strides and Connor Geekie.
He had a nice postseason.
I think you're going to see Max Crozier up here defensively. But, you've got a couple free agents. I mean, Luke Glendening, Cam Atkinson, Nick Perbix, or Yanni Gord are free agents, and so is Johansson. I think they'd like Johansson back, but we'll see if someone else gives them an opportunity to potentially start. If you sign here at Tampa Bay, you're the backup goalie.
Right.
I think Julian's going to look to make some moves, but I don't think you're going to see massive turnover or anything. I think, you heard Julian talk about the incredible numbers that they've had this season and really the good season they had. I mean, they had a really good regular season.
No, they were outstanding.
And
yeah.
As you said, take away those 2 goals and, Julian even talked about that game 4. For 16 minutes of that third period, Florida had 1 shot as they're trailing. They played 30 seconds of bad hockey, and a puck went in the net. Tie game. But as he said, okay, it's a tie game. You're still fine. And then they had that, bounce off McDonough. Tried to block a shot. It goes off him into the net. And all of a sudden you're down 3-2. And instead of going to game 5 with the series tied 2-2, you're down 3-1. And that was the series right there. Unfortunately.
It really was. It was that close. And, you make your own luck, but they did get some bounces. Florida got some bounces, and the Lightning did not.
Sure. But, I mean, that's, sometimes you do get lucky.
Yeah.
And Florida's a really good team, so they, they're creating some of their luck too.
They're creating their chances, yeah.
Yeah. But, if that puck, and they said the puck went through the middle of McDonough's skate.
That's insane, by the way.
Like it went through there and then through, that's
how many times
impossible.
would you have if you tried to shoot a puck through a guy's skate? How many times would it take you to do it?
If that's, I mean, that's nearly impossible. Like that's a 1 in a million shot or whatever. I mean,
almost, yeah. There's no room there,
and there's no way Vazzy can anticipate that happening.
Right. No, like I said, I'll leave it to the experts to know what they need to do to get better and how far or close they are from getting back to where they want to be. But it didn't sound like there was nothing in those press conferences that sounded like that at least Brisebois is ready to tear this up. Quite the opposite, that they believe they're closer than the 4-1 would indicate. But it's undeniable when you lose that many playoff games at home.
That's the weird part. What, 9 out of 10 they've lost?
9 out of 10 at home. That's tough, man. It was tough to be in that building. Like, my daughter is a huge Lightning fan, and the game was back and forth until they got to the third, and then Florida took a 4-3 lead going to the third. And when they did, I told Alexandra, I said, this is the Lightning really needed to go into the third tied, because if they give up a goal here, it's essentially over. It's going to be tough to come back from 2 goals, and that's exactly what happened. But it was close, but it's hard. It's hard to, the building was pretty energetic, and you really could feel, the fans behind them, and they just haven't taken advantage of what is a really good, home ice crowd, and the Thunder is there with them and all of that, but they just haven't been able to take advantage of it for a very long time, a very long time. And home ice might be, of all the playoffs, it might be like the least advantageous situation, but you still need to win. You still need to find a way to to win your home games when you're in the playoffs. So I don't know. It'll be an interesting off season, and one that I don't know that we'll have to wait very long to start to see some answers here, but something to really watch for. All right, we got speaking of watching for, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers begin their rookie minicamp on Friday. They'll be here. I think the kids come in probably Wednesday or Thursday, and so we'll be out there over the weekend talking to a bunch of them. Of course, It is a Sanders out there. It's Shiloh, not Shador, but he'll be fun to talk to, among others. The draft picks, certainly, I think this Benjamin Morrison is a hell of a kid and a hell of a story. I don't know if you've seen the videotape with him and his family and the goals that he wrote down for himself, and then the injury that he had to sustain last year to his hip. Something to be concerned about, but love the kid, and we'll talk more about him as the week goes on and some of the other rookies that'll be coming in here, but that's something to look forward to. And the Rays return home. I guess they have some time, and then they got the Phillies and I believe the Astros coming to town.
Correct, starting Tuesday night, so day off today for the Rays.
Yeah, and the Phillies have been playing pretty good ball of late, so those will be good series. So
did you watch the Derby over the weekend?
I did, and once again, it was a defeat for journalism.
Hey-o.
Hey-o. I'd said before the race, I said, well, journalism will outwork everybody, but not finish in the money, because that's pretty much been the way it goes. There was a horse. The only thing better was that the horse named Publisher did even worse. So that sort of balanced it out. Now that's always a kind of a fun event, and
it was muddy in the rain there.
Yeah, it was an awful track. Like it was terribly muddy. Yeah. But fun to watch. See where Mike Tirico had like an allergy, a nut,
yeah,
a peanut.
He's got a nut allergy, and apparently, either came in contact or something.
Yeah, couldn't host the Kentucky Derby as planned, but I guess he's okay. But that was kind of unusual. But yeah, I watched the Run for the Roses. It's the greatest 2 minutes in sports, but it's the longest buildup that I ever saw. I think I sat there and watched for an hour.
And how about every one of the 19 horses in the field this year were related to Secretariat?
And that's something. That's a stupid stat, and I'm not exactly sure I want to know how that happened, but let's just say that he was a thoroughbred in every way. Okay. I don't know what to make of it. I really don't. But that's how valuable those horses are, because the breeding and the lineage and things like that go on are incredible. And so yeah, it's interesting to me. I'm not a horse guy. I'm not into pyramid. I don't bet, certainly, but that is a race that I will watch. And I guess it's on a bucket list. Although you've been to Kentucky Derby several times, right?
Yeah, I've been 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah.
Now, it looks like a spectacle. I would go to try to see who I could see as much as anything. But if I don't have great seats, I'm not going to see those people anyway, right? Like there was I think they said
147,000.
147,000 people.
Well, the infield holds a ton. Like
that's insane, though, for that racetrack, right?
Well, but it's like what, Indy 500. How many hundreds of thousands they get there. The infield has so many people in it, and like it depends on what type of experience you. There's all kinds of different
like trying to get out of there. By the way,
I'm trying to remember. I think we hung around a while, and we were somewhere close too. So
yeah. No, but it's on a bucket list. I don't know. Like I think it might be one of those things that it's like looks really cool on TV. Not so sure I'm going to have a good time when I get there. I think the weather would be a factor.
Yeah, it's definitely better on a nice day.
Yeah.
And I went on 3 nice days, which was great. So
this was not a nice day, but it's something I want to do. That I would rank it though below the Masters. I want to go see I'd love to see the tournament at Augusta. That would be great.
Well, you're into golf more than you are horse racing, so if that makes sense
true.
too. So
not that I play, but I guess I am. Yeah, I mean,
horse racing. You like watching golf and stuff. I mean,
no, you're right. I don't.
I mean, outside the Kentucky Derby,
I'm not watching
maybe
the Breeders'
Preakness
Cup,
or Breeder.
You know what I mean?
Maybe Preakness or Belmont if the Triple Crown's at stake.
Yeah, to see if there's a Triple Crown possibility, I'll watch those. But yeah, for the most part, but still a spectacle. We used to cover it at the Times all the time. Like we'd have, Gary Shelton or Hubert Meisel or somebody would go there and write columns about horses. So, yeah, but interesting. Secretariat descendants all across the board. That's pretty wild. Okay, so keep it right here. Hey, go see our friends at Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. You got to check out the beautiful men's watches, the Navitimers, the Chronomats, the NFL special 104th year anniversary. Every team watch all 32 teams while supplies last, as well as women's watches, sports watches, all kinds of color wristbands for her, your wife, your girlfriend. Get on down to Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall, and when you do, make sure you tell them that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. Thanks for listening. For Steve Versnick, I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.